Report, I barked, my 4 secondary eyes narrowing while my primary ocular cluster remained fixed on the main view screen. The atmospheric disturbance was the first indication that something unusual had entered our sector. I, Grand Observer Thex'vor of the Azullian Confederation, watched from the command bridge as scanners registered an object hurtling through our orbital defense grid at speeds that shouldn't have been possible for something so primitive. Lieutenant Nazul approached, his carapace clicking nervously against the polished floor. "Sir, object appears to be a human vessel." A ripple of amusement swept through the bridge crew. Humans? Those fragile, soft-skinned creatures who'd barely managed interplanetary travel within their own pathetic solar system. The Galactic Council had classified them as a Level 2 civilization, hardly worth monitoring, much less concerning ourselves with. "Scan it again," I ordered, not bothering to hide my skepticism. No human craft could penetrate our outer defense ring. "Scans confirmed, sir," Nazul insisted, his voice quivering. "It's definitely human in origin, but the energy signature is unlike anything in our database." The view screen flickered, revealing a battered vessel streaked with carbon scoring and what appeared to be ice. Its design was crude, asymmetrical, clearly improvised from salvaged parts, but it moved with a grace that belied its appearance, dancing between our defensive grid with precision that even our best pilots would envy. That got my attention. I straightened my massive frame, towering over the lieutenant. On screen. Maximum magnification. "Hail them," I commanded, curiosity replacing my initial disdain. Communications Officer Vrel pressed several glowing nodes on her console. "Channel open, sir. Attention, human vessel. This is Grand Observer Thex'vor of the Azullian Confederation. You have entered restricted space. Identify yourself immediately or face obliteration." The response came not as words but as a burst of what humans call music, a chaotic, pulsing rhythm accompanied by a voice screaming lyrics that our translators struggled to process. Something about revenge served cold and burning it all down. "Charming," I muttered. "Target their propulsion systems. Disable only." Weapons Officer Jacksoul aimed our forward batteries, the targeting reticle closing in on the human ship. "Target locked, sir. Firing in 3, 2. The human vessel suddenly accelerated, performing a maneuver that should have torn it apart. Our plasma bolts missed by kilometers. "Impossible," Jacksoul hissed. "No organic pilot could withstand those G-forces." I felt something unfamiliar creep up my spine, an emotion I hadn't experienced in centuries of military service. Unease. "All batteries, open fire." "Full spread," I roared. The space around the human vessel lit up with plasma fire, enough firepower to reduce a small moon to debris. Yet somehow the ship slipped through the barrage untouched, as if it knew precisely where each shot would be before our gunners had even fired. And then it vanished. "Where did it go?" I demanded, slamming my command appendage against the arm of my chair. "Unknown, sir," Nazul replied, frantically scanning. "It just disappeared." A cold silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Then a voice, a human voice, filled the command center. "Remember Proxima Station, you six-eyed bastards?" "Identify yourself," I demanded, trying to trace the communication source. I froze. Proxima Station. The human research outpost at the edge of their solar system. We'd considered it a potential threat to Confederation interests, and that dealt with it accordingly. But that was 15 cycles ago. No survivors had been reported. A harsh laugh echoed through the bridge. "You really don't remember me, do you, Thex'vor? The lone human you left to die on that frozen rock after slaughtering everyone else. You should have made sure I was dead." My blood ran cold. Protocol dictated no survivors during strategic operations. It was impossible that anyone. "Commander Roth sends his regards." The voice continued, and now I detected something else in it. Not just rage, but satisfaction. "Oh, and you might want to check your engine core. I left you a little present while your scanners were busy chasing ghosts." "Engineering," I barked into the ship-wide comm. "Status report." The response was static, followed by a distant explosion that reverberated through the hull. Alarms blared across the bridge. Damage reports flooded in from all decks. Something had bypassed our security systems, our impenetrable defenses, our superior technology. Evacuation Protocol Omega. I ordered, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew it was too late. The human voice spoke one last time before our communications array failed. 15 years I planned this. 15 years of pain and rage and cold. Now feel what I felt. The difference is, I'm giving you a quicker death than you gave my friends. Secondary explosions rocked the ship. Emergency force fields failed deck by deck. I watched in horror as my crew, the finest warriors in the Confederation, scrambled for escape pods that mysteriously failed to launch. Through the viewport, I caught a glimpse of the human vessel. It had reappeared, hovering just outside weapons range, its pilot apparently content to watch us die. "This is impossible," I whispered to no one in particular. "They are just humans, primitive, weak humans." Lieutenant Nazul, bleeding from a head wound, laughed bitterly beside me. "Sir, with all due respect, I believe we may have, what's the human phrase, screwed up royally in our assessment." As my flagship began to break apart around me, I couldn't help but agree. Jacob Holloway watched the Azullian dreadnought tear itself apart through the cracked viewport of his cobbled-together ship, the Retribution. 15 years of planning, of surviving, of building, of hating, all for this moment. "One down," he muttered, his voice raspy from disuse. Speaking aloud still felt strange after so many years of silence on Proxima Station, his only companions the frozen corpses of his colleagues and the occasional AI interaction when power reserves allowed it. He remembered the day the Azullians came. No warning, no declaration, just methodical slaughter. They hadn't even bothered with proper weapons, simply breached the station's hull and let the vacuum do most of the work. Jake had survived only because he'd been in the experimental pressure suit when the attack happened, testing its limits in the maintenance airlock. They'd seen him, though. The Thex'vor himself had looked at Jake through the airlock window, made eye contact, and then simply left. Left him there with no ship, minimal life support, and the corpses of everyone he'd ever cared about. The Azullian commander probably thought it was mercy, or perhaps a fate worse than death. Either way, it had been a mistake. Sentient species report, ARIA. Jake called to his ship's AI, the only part of Proxima Station's systems he'd managed to salvage. "Processing," came the synthetic female voice. ARIA, Autonomous Responsive Intelligence Assistant, had been his only companion for 15 years. She'd kept him sane, or something approximating sanity. Confirmed fatalities on Azullian dreadnought, approximately 3. No escape pods successfully launched. Jake nodded, feeling nothing. He'd expected to feel something, satisfaction perhaps, or the release of long-held rage. Instead, there was only emptiness, and the next target on his list. "Set course for the Azullian colony on Vega Prime," he ordered, strapping himself back into the pilot's chair. "Engage stealth systems." "Jake." Uriah's voice had taken on that concerned tone she used when she thought he was being self-destructive. "Your vital signs indicate extreme fatigue. You have been awake for 73 hours. Protocol suggests rest before—" "Override protocol," Jake interrupted. "They don't rest, Aria. Neither do I. The Azullian Confederation has 17 major military installations and 43 colonies." Aria reminded him, "You cannot destroy them all." Jake allowed himself a small, cold smile as he watched the final explosion consume what remained of Thex'vor's flagship. "Watch me." On Vega Prime, Azullian Governor Plexer stared at the urgent communication from Confederation High Command with growing alarm. The destruction of Grand Observer Thex'vor's dreadnought had sent shockwaves through the sector. A single human seeking revenge for something that had happened 15 cycles ago. It seemed absurd. "Increase planetary defenses to maximum," Plexer ordered his security chief. "Double the patrol ships. Nothing gets near this colony without my direct authorization." "Yes, Governor," the security chief replied, saluting with all 4 arms. "Though if I may, it seems excessive for one human in a salvaged ship." Plexer affixed the security chief with a withering stare. "That one human just destroyed our most advanced warship and its entire crew. Do not underestimate this threat." As the security chief hurried away to implement the orders, Thex'vor turned to his personal terminal and accessed the classified archives. He needed to know more about this Proxima Station incident. 15 cycles was a long time, but surely there would be records. What he found disturbed him deeply. The operation had been classified at the highest level, authorized directly by the Supreme Council itself. The official reason given was preemptive neutralization of potential weapons research facility, but the attached intelligence reports seemed flimsy at best. Even more disturbing were the personnel files. Among the station's crew had been one Jacob Holloway, listed as engineering specialist. His file contained an unusual notation. Subject demonstrates exceptional adaptive capabilities and resourcefulness under extreme conditions. Recommendation: terminate with extreme prejudice. Someone had ignored that recommendation, and now they were all paying the price. A notification chimed, interrupting Thex'vor's research. "Governor, we are receiving a transmission. Unknown origin. Put it through," Thex'vor ordered, already suspecting who it might be. The screen flickered, revealing a human face. Gaunt, pale, with eyes that seemed to burn from within. Scars crisscrossed the left side of his face, and what Thex'vor assumed was once hair had been replaced by some kind of metallic implant that pulsed with subtle light. "Governor Thex'vor," the human said, his voice unnervingly calm. "My name is Jacob Holloway. You don't know me, but your people took everything from me. I'm returning the favor." Thex'vor maintained his composure with effort. "Mr. Holloway, I understand you have grievances against the Confederation. Perhaps we can discuss." "There's nothing to discuss," Jake interrupted. "I'm not interested in negotiations or reparations. I'm interested in extinction." "That's rather extreme," Thex'vor said carefully. "Whatever happened at Proxima Station?" Jake laughed, a sound entirely devoid of humor. "You don't even know, do you? You don't know why they killed 200 innocent researchers. Why don't you ask your Supreme Council what they were so afraid of? What they found in our transmissions that terrified them so much they ordered a massacre?" Thex'vor's mind raced. This was getting out of hand quickly. "Mr. Holloway, I assure you—" "Save your assurances," Jake cut him off. "You have 6 hours to evacuate the civilian population from Vega Prime. Anyone who remains after that deadline will share the fate of Thex'vor and his crew." "You are bluffing," Thex'vor said, trying to sound confident despite the cold dread settling in his stomach. "Your vessel, while impressive, cannot penetrate our planetary defenses." Jake smiled then, and it was perhaps the most terrifying expression Thex'vor had ever seen on any sentient being. "Who said anything about my vessel being the threat?" "Begin evacuation procedures immediately," he ordered. "Priority for juveniles and egg-bearers. And get me a direct line to the Supreme Council. Tell them we may have made a grave mistake." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Thex'vor staring at a blank screen. After a moment's hesitation, he opened a channel to the security center. Deep in the asteroid belt surrounding Vega Prime, Jake watched the panicked evacuation begin. Ships of all sizes were lifting off from the colony, forming a chaotic stream toward the system's jump point. "They are actually doing it," he murmured, somewhat surprised. "They are evacuating." "Your threat was convincing," Ori observed. "Though I note you haven't actually planted any explosive devices on Vega Prime." Jake shrugged. "They don't know that. And what happens after the 6-hour deadline? They will realize your bluff." Jake turned to the makeshift workbench behind his pilot's seat, where a small device hummed quietly. It wasn't a bomb, not in the conventional sense. It was something he'd discovered in Proxima Station's classified research archives. Something that had likely prompted the Azullian attack in the first place. "Who said it was a bluff?" he replied softly. "The difference between a madman and a Vegier is often just a matter of perspective. Aria, and success, of course." "Jake," Aria's voice had taken on an unusual hesitancy. "The device you have constructed. According to my calculations, it will do far more than disable the Azullian colony. If activated, it could potentially—" "I know exactly what it will do," Jake interrupted. "That's the point." He checked the chronometer. 5 hours and 23 minutes remaining before the deadline. Plenty of time to position the device and clear the blast radius. A proximity alert suddenly blared through the cabin. Jake swiveled back to the controls, scanning the readouts with practiced efficiency. Multiple ships approaching, he muttered. Not Azullian design. Identifying. The scanner completed its analysis, and Jake felt the first genuine surprise he'd experienced in years. Human vessels, Arya confirmed. 3 of them. Federation military signatures. Impossible, Jake whispered. Earth doesn't have ships this far out. They don't even know I'm alive. The lead vessel hailed him, and with reluctant curiosity, Jake accepted the transmission. The face that appeared on his view screen was human. A woman, perhaps in her 50s, with steely gray hair and the unmistakable uniform of an Earth Federation admiral. A lot has changed in 15 years, son, Admiral Carter replied, including our understanding of what really happened at Proxima Station and what you are planning to do about it, Jacob Holloway, she said, her expression unreadable. This is Admiral Diana Carter of the Earth Federation vessel Harbinger. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. Jake stared at the screen in disbelief. How are you here? Earth doesn't have this technology. Jake's hand moved instinctively toward the emergency purge button that would wipe Arya's memory and destroy all evidence of his plans. I wouldn't, the Admiral warned, as if reading his mind. We are not here to stop you, Jake. We are here to help. Help, Jake repeated incredulously. The Federation abandoned us, left us out here with no defenses, no support. You expect me to believe you care now? Admiral Carter's expression softened slightly. We didn't know, Jake. Not until recently. The Azullians have been blocking our long-range communications for decades. We thought Proxima was lost to an accident. It wasn't until we captured an Azullian intelligence officer 3 months ago that we learned the truth. Jake's mind raced. Could it be true? Had Earth really been kept in the dark all this time? What do you want from me? He asked finally. Your revenge is understandable, the Admiral said carefully, but limited in scope. You are thinking too small, Mr. Holloway. Too small? Jake gestured toward the view screen showing the evacuating Azullian colony. I just destroyed their flagship and forced the evacuation of an entire colony world. Admiral Carter nodded. Impressive. Now imagine what you could do with proper resources, proper intelligence, and the full backing of Earth's military. For the first time in 15 years, Jake felt something crack in the ice that had formed around his heart. Not hope. He was too far gone for that. But perhaps purpose. Something beyond the all-consuming desire for revenge that had kept him alive on that frozen rock. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral? The Azullians are preparing for war, Jake. Not just against you, but against Earth itself. They have concluded that humanity is too dangerous to allow its continued existence. Your actions have only accelerated their timetable. Good, Jake said flatly. Let them come. They will, the Admiral assured him. But on our terms, not theirs. We have been preparing too, ever since we learned the truth. And you, Mr. Holloway, are a key part of our strategy. Jake glanced at the device on his workbench, the culmination of 15 years of planning and hate. Then back at the Admiral, who was offering him something he hadn't considered, the chance to hurt the Azullians on a scale he could never achieve alone. I'm listening, he said finally. Admiral Carter smiled. And there was something in that smile that reminded Jake of his own reflection. They left you on a frozen rock thinking you would die. Instead, you are going to help us burn their entire civilization to the ground. For the first time in 15 years, Jake Holloway smiled back. Supreme Counselor Zavnar of the Azullian Confederation was not accustomed to fear. As the highest authority in the most powerful species alliance in the known galaxy, he had little reason to experience such a primitive emotion. Yet fear was exactly what gripped him. As he reviewed the reports from Vega Prime and the remains of Thex'vor's dreadnought, one human, one survivor from an operation that should have left no survivors, one man who had spent 15 cycles planning revenge. How is this possible? He demanded of the assembled military high command. Our intelligence indicated that humans were generations away from developing technology that could threaten us. Fleet Admiral Korvax shifted uncomfortably. The human vessel appears to incorporate elements of our own technology. Supreme Counselor. We believe he salvaged components from Proxima Station after the incident. This device, Governor Plexer reported. The one the human threatened to deploy on Vega Prime. The science advisor stepped forward, her scales paling with stress. Based on the energy signatures detected before the human disappeared from our sensors, we believe it may be related to the research they were conducting at Proxima. Which was? Zevnar pressed. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Finally, the intelligence director spoke. Dimensional phasing, Supreme Counselor. They were researching ways to shift matter between dimensional states. Zevnar felt his blood run cold. That's why the strike was authorized. We detected their breakthrough and determined it posed an existential threat. Yes, Supreme Counselor, but it appears we miscalculated. By attacking the station, we may have driven the lone survivor to perfect the technology out of desperation. The implications were staggering. If humans mastered dimensional phasing, the Confederation's technological advantages would be nullified overnight. Their defenses would be useless against weapons that could simply phase through them. Find him, Zevnar ordered, his voice deadly quiet. Find him and end this. And prepare the fleet for immediate deployment to the human home system. If one human can cause this much damage, we cannot risk allowing their civilization to continue. As the military leaders rushed to carry out his orders, Zevnar remained alone in the council chamber, contemplating the magnitude of their error. They had left a human to die on a frozen rock, thinking him harmless and isolated. Instead, they had created the perfect weapon against themselves. A man with nothing to lose, armed with their own technology and driven by a hatred that had sustained him through 15 cycles of planning. For the first time in his long life, Supreme Counselor Zevnar wondered if the Azullian Confederation had finally encountered a species they should have feared from the beginning. Admiral Diana Carter watched Jacob Holloway carefully as he paced the briefing room of the Harbinger. For a man who'd spent 15 years alone on a frozen station at the edge of the solar system, he moved with surprising grace, his body augmented with crude but effective cybernetics of his own design. You still haven't told me how Earth suddenly developed ships capable of interstellar travel, Jake said, pausing to examine a holographic display of the Azullian home system. Last I checked, we were still using chemical rockets to reach Mars. Diana exchanged glances with her EXO commander Pavel Resnick before responding. That was the public-facing space program, Mr. Holloway. There have always been other initiatives. Jake snorted. Black projects? Really? You expect me to believe Earth had secret faster-than-light technology and kept it hidden? Not exactly, Diana replied. We had theories, prototypes. Nothing functional. But 6 years ago we had visitors. Not Azullian. That got Jake's attention. He stopped pacing and turned to face her fully, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused. What kind of visitors? They call themselves the Dravak Collective. Another spacefaring civilization, but one with a particular hatred for the Azullian Confederation. They have been fighting a shadow war against them for centuries. And they just gave you advanced technology? Out of the goodness of their hearts? Jake's skepticism was palpable. Commander Resnick laughed, a short, harsh sound. Hardly. The Dravak don't have hearts, literally or figuratively. They gave us technology because they needed proxies. The Azullians have been systematically exterminating any species that might eventually challenge them. The Dravak are looking for allies. Jake absorbed this information, his expression unreadable. So Earth made a deal with these Dravak. Got fancy ships, weapons. And now what? We are fighting their war for them? We are fighting our war, Diana corrected firmly. After we learned what really happened at Proxima Station, after we confirmed the Azullians were preparing to neutralize Earth just like they did to your colleagues. Let's just say humanity united pretty quickly. Jake moved to the viewport, staring out at the stars. Why me? Why come find me after all this time? I'm just one man with a grudge. Diana stepped beside him, her reflection appearing next to his in the transparent aluminum of the viewport. Because you have done what our entire military couldn't. You put fear into the Azullians. And because of what you found at Proxima Station, the dimensional phasing technology. Jake's face hardened. So that's it. You want my weapon. We want you, Jake. Diana said quietly. The weapon is just a bonus. Your knowledge of Azullian systems, your experience fighting them, your sheer stubborn will to survive. Those are worth a dozen battleships. For a long moment, Jake was silent, considering. Finally, he turned back to the holographic display of the Azullian home system. If we are going to do this, he said slowly, we do it my way. No half measures. No mercy. They didn't show any to my friends. Diana nodded. The gloves are already off, Mr. Holloway. This isn't a peacekeeping mission, it's an extermination. Jake's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then let me show you what I have been working on for the past 15 years. Planetary Defense Coordinator Thex'vor of the Azullian homeworld Nexus Prime had never expected to face a real attack in his lifetime. The defense grid surrounding the Confederation capital was the most sophisticated in known space. 3 overlapping shield systems, automated defense platforms with artificial intelligence targeting systems, and a fleet of 500 warships in constant orbit. No enemy had dared attack Nexus Prime in 700 cycles. The very idea was laughable. So when the proximity alarms began blaring across his command center, Thex'vor's first reaction was annoyance rather than concern. System malfunction, he muttered, gesturing for a subordinate to check the diagnostics. Run a level 3 diagnostic and reset the sensor array. Sir, the subordinate replied hesitantly, the alarms are being triggered by multiple systems independently. Sensors, visual confirmation from orbital platforms, and direct reports from the outer fleet. This appears to be genuine. Thex'vor's secondary heart skipped a beat. That's impossible. Display visual feed from the outer defense perimeter. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a section of space near the system's edge. At first, Thex'vor saw nothing unusual, just the normal starfield and the distant shapes of Confederation vessels on patrol. Then space itself seemed to tear. There was no other way to describe it. A rippling distortion, like fabric being ripped apart, spread across the view screen. Through the tear came ships, dozens, then hundreds of them, human vessels unmistakable in their inelegant but functional design. Battle stations, Thex'vor bellowed, all traces of complacency vanishing. Alert the Supreme Council. All civilian vessels to emergency shelters. This is not a drill. The command center erupted into frantic activity as his orders were relayed throughout the planetary defense network. On the view screen, the first exchanges of fire had already begun, bright lances of energy from the Azullian patrol ships meeting the incoming human fleet. But something was wrong. The human vessels were taking direct hits without showing signs of damage. Some of the shots seemed to pass right through them as if they weren't fully. Magnify Sector 7, Thex'vor ordered, a terrible suspicion forming in his mind. The view screen zoomed in on one of the human battleships. As they watched, an Azullian cruiser fired a full barrage directly at it. The energy weapons struck the human vessel and simply passed through, continuing into space beyond. Even as he spoke, the human ships began to change their attack pattern. They were no longer exchanging fire from a distance. Instead, they were accelerating directly toward the Azullian defense fleet. On collision courses. Dimensional phasing, Thex'vor whispered in horror. They have weaponized it. But they weren't colliding. They were passing through the Azullian ships, their hulls temporarily occupying the same space, and when they emerged on the other side, the Azullian vessels were left drifting, their systems offline, crews dead or dying from exposure to whatever dimensional energies the human ships were generating. Get me a direct line to Fleet Admiral Korvax, Thex'vor demanded, struggling to keep his voice steady, and begin evacuation of critical personnel from the surface. The outer defense grid won't hold. As his staff scrambled to comply, Thex'vor watched the systematic destruction of the most powerful defense fleet in the galaxy. The humans weren't just winning. They were annihilating the Azullian forces without taking significant damage themselves. And at the forefront of the human armada leading the charge toward Nexus Prime was a smaller vessel that sensor readings identified as a modified research shuttle. Thex'vor focused the scanners on it, puzzled by why such an insignificant craft would be at the vanguard of this unprecedented attack. The shuttle's identity code finally registered in the database, and Thex'vor felt his blood freeze in his veins. Proxima Station Research Vessel 7, he read aloud. Pilot identified as Jacob Holloway. The human, the lone survivor they had left to die 15 cycles ago. He wasn't just participating in this attack, he was leading it. Jake felt an almost euphoric sense of calm as he piloted the retribution through the chaos of battle. His modified shuttle, enhanced with both Azullian technology salvaged from Proxima Station and newer advancements provided by Admiral Carter's fleet, slipped between dimensional states with perfect precision, becoming partially insubstantial whenever Azullian weapons locked onto him. "The main defense fleet is in disarray," Arya reported. Her voice as composed as ever despite the massive energy readings fluctuating around them. "Admiral Carter reports 97% effectiveness of the phasing technology. Azullian casualties estimated at 60,000 and climbing." Jake nodded, guiding the shuttle toward the gleaming blue-green sphere of Nexus Prime. "And our losses?" 17 human vessels destroyed, approximately 800 personnel. The Dravak contingent reports minimal casualties. Their biological composition makes them more resilient to dimensional transition effects. 800 humans dead. Jake should have felt something about that. Regret, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement of the sacrifice. Instead, he felt only cold determination. 800 versus the 200 friends and colleagues he'd lost at Proxima Station. The math seemed appropriate somehow. "That's why we have Plan B," Jake replied, activating a secure channel to the human flagship. "Admiral, we are approaching the planetary shields. Time for the second phase." "We are approaching the planetary shield grid," Arya warned. "Dimensional phasing may be less effective at these energy levels. The shields were designed to prevent matter transmission of any kind." Deanna's voice came through clearly despite the electromagnetic interference saturating the battlefield. "Understood. Dravak forces are in position. Beginning bombardment of the shield generators now." On cue, a squadron of angular obsidian black vessels broke formation from the main human fleet. These were the Dravak ships, built for a species that evolved in high radiation environments and possessed both technological and biological advantages. The humans still couldn't match. They accelerated toward Nexus Prime's North Pole, where the primary shield generators were located. Azullian defensive fire intensified, finally finding targets that couldn't simply phase out of existence to avoid damage. Several Dravak ships exploded in brilliant flashes, but the remainder pressed their attack with single-minded determination. They weren't using energy weapons or conventional explosives. Instead, they were sacrificing themselves, their ship's power cores modified to create localized singularities upon destruction. Jake watched as the first artificial black hole blossomed near the shield generator complex, its gravitational pull visibly distorting the energy field surrounding the planet. Two more followed in quick succession, the combined gravitational anomalies creating precisely calculated stress points in the planetary shields. "Shield integrity at 62% and falling," Arya reported. "Estimated breach in 97 seconds. Jake's hands tightened on the controls. 97 seconds until he could finally deliver the retribution he'd been planning for 15 years. 97 seconds until the Azullian leadership, the ones who had actually ordered the Proxima massacre, would face him directly. "Jake?" Arya's voice had taken on an unusual quality. Something almost like concern. "Your vital signs indicate extreme stress levels. Your cybernetic implants are struggling to compensate." Jake ignored her. His makeshift cybernetics, crude replacements for the parts of himself he'd been forced to sacrifice during those early desperate years on Proxima Station, were holding together well enough. They only needed to last a little longer. "Planetary shields collapsing," Arya announced. "Breach confirmed. All ships, this is Holloway." Jake broadcast to the human fleet. "Follow my vector to the capital complex. Remember, the Supreme Council chamber is to be left intact. They are mine." A chorus of acknowledgments followed as the human fleet reorganized, forming up behind Jake's shuttle as it dove toward the now exposed surface of Nexus Prime. The Azullian capital city spread below them, its crystalline spires and gravity-defying architecture unlike anything on Earth. It was beautiful, Jake had to admit, and he was about to turn much of it to ash. "Defense batteries targeting," Arya warned as surface-to-air weapons began tracking their approach. "Phase shift," Jake commanded, activating the dimensional drive. The shuttle shimmered, partially shifting between dimensional states, The Azullian defensive fire passed harmlessly through them, continuing into the sky to strike unfortunate ships that weren't equipped with the phasing technology. The human fleet opened fire on the city below, targeting military installations, communications arrays, and government buildings. Everything except the central spire that housed the Supreme Council chamber. That, as Jake had insisted, was to remain untouched. Explosions bloomed across the Azullian capital, beautiful and terrible. Jake felt no satisfaction as he watched a civilization burn, only a grim sense that justice was finally being served. Cold justice, perhaps, but justice nonetheless. Taking us down, he murmured, guiding the shuttle toward the central spire. Prepare for direct insertion. Rather than landing conventionally, Jake activated the shuttle's phase drive one final time, aiming directly at the side of the Supreme Council chamber. The shuttle passed partially through the crystalline wall, rematerializing half inside the building before its systems automatically stabilized. Jake unstrapped from the pilot's seat, checking the power levels on his makeshift weapons. "Aria, lock down the shuttle. No one enters or exits without my direct authorization." "Understood," the AI replied. "Jake, be careful." Jake paused, momentarily surprised by the sentiment. After 15 years together, Aria had developed well beyond her original programming, becoming something very like a friend. "I always am," he replied with a grim smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then he cycled the airlock and stepped into the Supreme Council chamber of the Azullian Confederation. Supreme Councilor Zavnar had always imagined his death would come peacefully, after centuries of service to the Confederation. Not here, not now, cowering behind his ceremonial desk as his world burned around him. The emergency lighting cast eerie blue shadows through the council chamber. The rest of the Supreme Council had fled or been evacuated, but Semder had remained. Partly out of duty, partly out of pride, but mostly because he knew it was futile. The humans had come for vengeance, and they would not stop until they found him. When the wall of the chamber suddenly rippled and a small human vessel materialized halfway through it, Zavnar felt an odd sense of relief. At least the waiting was over. The human who emerged from the vessel was not what Zavnar had expected. From the reports, he had anticipated a monster, a creature of pure hate and rage. Instead, he saw a gaunt man with mechanical augmentations and eyes that held not fury but something far worse, absolute, implacable purpose. "Supreme Councilor Zavnar," the human said, his voice surprisingly soft. "I have waited a long time for this meeting." Zavnar straightened his posture, determined to face death with dignity. "You must be Jacob Holloway, the survivor from Proxima Station." "The only survivor," Jake corrected, stepping further into the chamber. "Thanks to your order. A regrettable but necessary action," Zavnar replied, surprised by his own calm. "Your research into dimensional phasing represented an existential threat to our civilization." He gestured toward the windows, where the burning capital was visible. "As you have now proven." Jake laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "That's your justification? You murdered 200 innocent people because you were afraid of what they might discover?" "We are the guardians of galactic stability," Zavnar said. "For 50,000 cycles, the Azullian Confederation has maintained peace across 17 sectors. Sometimes that requires difficult decisions." "Spare me the rationalization," Jake said, his voice hardening. "I didn't come for a debate on galactic politics. I came for justice." Zavnar nodded slowly. "And now you have it. Our military in ruins, our capital burning, our civilization on the brink of collapse. Will killing me personally provide you with the closure you seek?" Jake approached the desk, studying the alien leader with clinical detachment. "That's the interesting thing, Counselor. For 15 years I dreamed of this moment, killing you, watching the light fade from your eyes. It was what kept me going through the darkest times." He placed a small device on the desk, a simple metallic cube that hummed with barely contained energy. "But I have realized something," Jake continued. "Death would be too merciful, too quick. I want you to live, Zavnar. I want you to live and watch as everything you built crumbles around you. I want you to experience what I experienced, being the lone survivor of an extinction event." Simner's composure finally cracked, his secondary eyes blinking rapidly in distress. What is that device? Insurance, Jake replied simply. It contains quantum-locked coordinates of every Azullian colony, outpost, and hidden installation throughout the galaxy. The information is being transmitted to the human fleet as we speak. Understanding dawned on Zavnar's face. You are going to hunt down every last one of us. Not all of you, Jake corrected. Just enough to ensure the Azullian Confederation never threatens another species again. We will leave survivors on remote worlds, with limited technology, enough to rebuild a civilization eventually, but not an empire. Never again an empire. You would condemn an entire species based on the actions of its leadership. Zavnar demanded, genuine outrage in his voice. Jake's expression hardened. You did exactly that to the humans at Proxima Station. The difference is, I'm showing more mercy than you did. Your people will have a chance to survive, to learn from this mistake. Mine didn't. A loud explosion rocked the building, sending crystalline fragments cascading from the ceiling. The human fleet's bombardment was intensifying. Your shuttle, Zavnar said suddenly. Understanding. You are going to leave me here, aren't you? Just as we left you. Jake nodded. Symmetry seems appropriate, but unlike you, I'm not completely heartless. Why? Zavnar asked, genuinely puzzled. Why give me a chance to escape? He tossed a small communication device onto the desk. This will allow you to contact what remains of your fleet. There are still evacuation ships leaving the southern continent. If you hurry, you might make it. Jake's lips curved in a cold smile. Because I want you to live with what you have done, Counselor. I want you to see your mighty confederation reduced to scattered refugees. I want you to spend the rest of your long life remembering that it was your decision, your order, that led to all of this. He turned back toward his shuttle, pausing at the airlock. Oh, and one more thing. The Dravak Collective sends their regards. They have been very helpful in planning all of this. Zavnar hissed in shock. The Dravak? They are extinct. We eliminated them centuries ago. Not all of them, Jake replied. Sound familiar? You should have made sure they were completely gone. Same mistake you made with me. Without another word, Jake entered his shuttle. Moments later, the vessel phased through the wall again, disappearing from the council chamber. Zavnar stood alone amid the destruction of everything he had spent his life building. Outside, the once glorious capital of the Azullian Confederation burned. In orbit, the remnants of the defense fleet scattered before the human onslaught. With trembling hands, he picked up the communication device Jake had left behind. There was still time to escape, to survive. But to what end? To live as a witness to his civilization's downfall? To carry the shame of knowing that his own decision had triggered this catastrophe? As another explosion shook the building, Zavnar made his choice. From the safety of the Harbinger's observation deck, Admiral Diana Carter watched as the final phase of Operation Retribution unfolded. The Azullian capital was largely in ruins now, strategic targets destroyed with surgical precision. The civilian evacuation had been permitted to proceed. Jake had been insistent on that point, refusing to inflict unnecessary casualties on non-combatants. Status report, she ordered as her XO approached. Azullian military resistance has effectively ceased throughout the system, Commander Resnick reported. Their remaining vessels are either surrendering or retreating toward the outer colonies. Casualties are within projected parameters. Diana nodded, her expression grave despite the victory. And Holloway, his shuttle docked 10 minutes ago. He's in medical now. His cybernetic implants were failing during the final assault. Dr. Chaudhry thinks they can stabilize him, but he will need extensive surgery to properly integrate the Federation's biotech replacements. Make sure he gets the best care possible, Diana ordered. That man has earned it. Will be managed, Diana finished firmly. The Dravak have already agreed to help establish a new interstellar council, one with equal representation for all spacefaring species. No more empires, no more guardians of galactic stability, just mutual defense and cooperation. Resnick hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling many in the fleet. What happens now, Admiral? We have effectively destroyed the most powerful civilization in known space. The power vacuum this creates